I'm gonna explain Hereditary. I have an essay here, kinda. I took notes, so I'm gonna explain the movie pretty much. Overall, the movie's about possession. The grandma's the leader of this cult to bring payment back to life, and we see it all play out after she dies. And then in the meantime, it's also like a metaphor for grief and trauma, and it shows the family breaking down and basically to the point where it's almost like a nightmare. But the literal meaning of the movie is possession. They're trying to find a male body for payment, which is Peter. And he's the main character of the movie because from the beginning you see they zoom in and it's on Peter. And he's the last one they show in the movie. So the movie's pretty much all about Peter. But first off, we start with the grandma. So her goal was to bring back payment. As you can see, it said that there will be riches for the conjurer. It said that like in the book. So if she conjures payment, I guess she will be rewarded in the afterlife with riches, knowledge, all that stuff. So in that note that Annie finds in her mom's room, it says like try not to despair about the losses that are to come and all that. Like sorry for what is gonna happen, but it will pale in comparison to the rewards. So that means like when they bring back payment, they're gonna be rewarded in the afterlife. So apparently the grandma has been trying to bring back payment for a while. Like she's tried this ritual before, cause so she tried and she failed with her son. Cause when Annie's in the meeting, she says that her brother he killed himself because he said that his mom was trying to put people inside of him. So yeah, that was the grandma trying to put payment inside of her son first. But it didn't work because he killed himself. So yeah, and she wanted to get to Peter, but she couldn't get to Peter because Annie, as she said in the meeting, that she didn't let her mother anywhere near Peter when she had him. They had like that no contact rule. But she gave her Charlie. So then the grandma settled for Charlie pretty much. And that was payment. Charlie was payment in the beginning. She settled for Charlie's body, but it was an imperfect body because payment needs a male body. So that, I guess that's why Charlie was so weird because, you know, she was possessed by payment and it wasn't perfect. But yeah, she was probably payment since birth or from like a really young age because they show her breastfeeding Charlie in that model. It shows the grandma breastfeeding Charlie. That was probably her maybe passing down stuff, trying to, you know, yeah. So yeah, and then it said that the grandmother suffered from DID, which is multiple personality disorder. So that means she probably payment was inside of her probably first, so she passed it on to Charlie because, you know, she spent so much time with Charlie. It said that Charlie was her favorite, and yeah, and then whenever you heard the clicking noise, that was payment. As you can tell in the end when Peter clicks, that's because payment. He's possessed by payment, and yeah. Oh, and also there's a point where Charlie says that grandma always wished she was a boy. That's also because, you know, payment needs a male body. And the grandma even planned for Charlie to be a boy because, you know, those little rugs she made? She had one that said Charles, so that was supposed to be for Charlie, but it turned out to be a girl, so yeah. So another thing is the cult members. They're pretty much making sure everything goes as planned. So at the funeral, when Annie says she barely recognizes anyone, though that's because most of them are the cult members that are there for the grandma. And that naked guy smiling towards the end that you see him in the doorway, that's the same guy who was smiling at Charlie in the funeral, and he's one of the cult members. And all those weird smiles is because they knew Charlie was payment, so they were smiling at her because they knew it was payment, and you know, they're smiling because they adore payment or whatever. And yeah, there's a lot of scenes where you see the cult. There's a scene where you could see them surrounding the house towards the end. Like when it's turning from night to day, you see them all surrounding the house with like candles. And there's a scene in the beginning where Peter, he's smoking and he's blowing smoke out the window, and then you see smoke blowing back. That was probably another cult member that was outside watching the house or whatever, or watching Peter. And then the cult members, they dug up the grandma, and they beheaded her and put her in the attic and all that. And yeah, so everything in the movie is pretty much part of this whole payment plan. And you can notice, like, they show the street pole before the accident, and it has the payment symbol. So that means that the whole accident was planned too. That was meant to happen for Charlie to be beheaded. And then the cult members, they put the deer on the road so that, it will happen. And, also the glowing light, that's payment. You can tell at the end when it goes into Annie and she's possessed, when it goes into Peter and he's possessed, then it appears to Charlie pointing things out to her and all that stuff. That's payment when he's not inside of a body. That's him when he's outside of the body. So yeah, beheading is a big thing in the movie. It says that it's the preferred execution method of payment because the head is where knowledge is. And, he's like the demon of knowledge and mischief and all that stuff. And in the book where they show the photo of Payman, you can see that he's riding like on a horse, and he has like 3 heads attached to his belt. And that's the 3 heads that are needed for the ritual. The head of the grandma, the head of Charlie, and the head of Annie. They're all women in the same bloodline, so that could also be where the title of the movie Hereditary comes from. But yeah, so Payman, he's released from the body when it's beheaded, and he enters the body when it's most vulnerable. So he leaves Charlie when she's decapitated, and then he goes into Annie when her husband is burned into flames, because that's when she loses it. That's when she's most vulnerable, like she's completely broken. So that's when Payman can enter her. And then when she's beheaded, and then Peter sees his mom died in front of him. That's when he's broken, most vulnerable. So that's after he jumps out the window, then Payman goes inside of him. So yeah, beheading is a whole big thing. And yeah, so Joan, let's talk about Joan. So that whole seance ritual that she did with that she told Annie to do, that was to summon Charlie or Payman's spirit back into the house after it was liberated from Charlie, after she was decapitated. So yeah, Charlie was Payman, so it was the same thing. They thought they were summoning Charlie back, but she was Payman basically, so they were bringing Payman back. And yeah, so Joan, she pretty much set it all up. And then you could tell also that there was something in the tea when she went to Joan's house. When Annie drank the tea, she like had that little green herb that she found in there. That was probably had to do with the ritual or something. And yeah, and then it shows, in the mail slot when they show the whole seance, like calling all skeptics, blah 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 blah. That was probably Joan or one of the cult members putting it in the mail so that Annie would go to that whole seance thing where they would tell her about this whole ritual to bring back deceased family members. But she didn't end up going to that. So then that's when she accidentally runs into Joan in the parking lot when she's like, "Oh my God, man, is that you?" So yeah, she was there the whole time. She was basically just trying to get Annie. Yeah. And then, yeah, let's see. I got a bunch of stuff here. So yeah, when Joan screams at Peter when he's in the playground or whatever in recess, and she's like screaming at him, she's like, "Peter, Peter," and she does that whole "I expel you." She's basically kicking Peter out of his own body. That whole spell is to kick Peter out of his own body. She's making room for Payman. Because at that point, the ritual's almost finishing and she's trying to get Peter out and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, Joan, she finessed Annie. I mean, at first, she was trying to stop Annie. You thought she cared for her and all that stuff. But really, she was just saying anything she could to, give Annie her number and make sure that she contacted her so she could show her how to do the ritual and, all that stuff. There's also a lot of foreshadowing in the movie. At the party, the two teenagers, they're watching a video of someone being decapitated with a guillotine. So that's about to foreshadow what's going to happen with Charlie in the car. Also in the classroom, when the teacher he's asking like whether the story would have been more tragic if the character had any say in the events that happened to him, any choice. And that relates to the movie because all the characters in the family, they basically don't have a choice. All that's happening is planned out. And they're like pawns in this whole scheme. And they don't have any control. And then the pigeon head and the other two animal heads, like Charlie had those animal heads, she kept in her collection. Those are foreshadowing for the actual beheadings that are to come. The pigeon head that she draws with the crown, that's foreshadowing about her head at the end when it's on the statue with the crown. I mean, when she drew pictures and all that, she drew pictures like of the future, like she was foreshadowing events to come. Like she draws pictures of Annie and Peter, like hysterical and upset, and that's before all the really crazy stuff happens, like towards the beginning of the movie when she's still alive. And so they say Payman is the demon of king of knowledge and foreshadowing. So that's him through Charlie drawing the pictures to foreshadow the events to come. And so Charlie basically was always Payman, except in that moment when they do the ritual and then you hear the mom talking like Charlie, where she's like, "Mom, what's going on? What's going on?" You could tell that's actually Charlie because she's completely different than she was when she was alive. Like that's her, because she's free from Payman at that point. Payman is free, and Charlie's spirit is free because she's dead. Some interesting details is that Annie, she likely subconsciously knew about her grandma's plan, like the whole time, like in her subconscious, because that's why she wanted to have a miscarriage. In the dream, she told Peter that she was trying to protect him, and that was when she was sleepwalking. So her sleepwalking is basically her subconscious taking over. So her subconscious wants to have a miscarriage so that Payman won't have Peter to possess and all that. And that's why she was going to burn herself and her kids, because she wanted to stop the ritual from happening. But she did that while sleepwalking, so that was, again, subconsciously. So that probably came maybe from her dad's side, because she said that her dad, in the meeting, she said that her dad starved himself to death. So he probably knew what the grandma was up to, and maybe he starved himself because he didn't trust anything she gave him to eat. Or maybe she tried to put Payman inside of him, and he starved himself so that he would die and then prevent the ritual from happening. But and then another interesting fact is in the end, when you hear the piano crash, after the mom is chasing Peter, and you hear the piano crash, and then you see it destroyed, the string that was pulled out, that's what Annie used to kill herself in the attic. That's just an interesting detail. Also, that whole throat getting bigger thing, like the allergic reactions and all that, that probably wasn't... So Charlie probably was never allergic, because there's a scene where you see her, she's making her little figures, and she's eating like peanut M&Ms. You can tell they're peanut M&Ms, like they're crunchy and everything. So that whole reaction is probably because of Payman. He probably did that to her in the car so that she'd stick her head out the window and all that. And then he probably did, when it happened to Peter, that was probably payment, because Peter was already, traumatized after he saw Charlie die. So then payment probably got into Peter. That was him starting to possess Peter a little bit. And also the dad burning. That's probably weird. Like, a lot of people may not know why that happened, why the dad burned when they put the book in the fire. But to explain that, it's that the book was linked to everyone that was present during the ritual. So since him, Peter, and the mother were all present during the ritual, they're all linked to the book. So when they put the book in the fire, I guess Pym could control who burns. So at first he did it to Annie to make her think that it was going to only burn Annie, but then when she did it again, he killed her husband in front of her, and that's what ultimately broke her down and allowed her to get possessed. And yeah. Also, when the husband is like, "Oh, what's that smell?" You might want to check in the attic. You probably caught that. And also, if you notice, when the paint is knocked over, when she's working on her model and she knocks over the paint, if you notice, she actually never touched the bottle. It knocks over by itself. So you could tell that's payment manipulating the situation so that the paint would knock on the note and then she would see the note and call up Joan. And yeah, also something interesting is when Peter's in the classroom and he gets possessed and he does that weird hand motion. The hand motion he does is the same way the hand is positioned, like the statue at the end. You know how the statue of the crown, his hand's like that. That's the same position that Peter was in when he got possessed by Payment in the classroom. And yeah, that's like the upside down version of like what Jesus does in his statue. So that's like a anti-Christ thing, demonic stuff. Yeah, there's more. I'm almost done though. What was it? So yeah, anyway, the whole opening scene where the house is shown and they zoom into, like the dollhouse, they show the dollhouse and they zoom in and then they show the house. That is a metaphor for how Payment is basically manipulating the whole family. Like, the characters in the movie are pretty much like dolls being played with. They don't have any choice. It's all part of Payment's plan. So, something else. When Peter's in the attic and Annie was banging on her head, on top of, like, when she keeps banging her head, she immediately stops after he says, "I'm sorry." And earlier in the movie, she says that she's been waiting for him to apologize for Charlie's death for a long time, but he never did. And then when he says he's sorry, she stops banging her head, which is another interesting detail. And also, there's another part in the classroom when the teacher's like, the hero's tragic and comes down to his own fatal flaw. And then while the teacher's saying that, Peter's looking at the girl's ass, so that's his fatal flaw, you know. And then later on in the movie, he follows that girl to go smoke weed with her. And then that's when everything else starts happening. So all of that pretty much starts off due to his fatal flaw, because he was going after that girl. That's what caused Charlie to be by herself, eat the cake with the nuts and all that stuff. And also in the book about Payment, it also states that it needs to summon Payment, you need a lustful male, and yeah, that's Peter. He's lustful. He's thirsty. Anyway, yeah, and there's another thing in the classroom. They're like literally ignoring the signs that were literally handed to them. I think the girl in front of him answers that to one of the questions. And that's like the family. They're ignoring all the signs right in front of them. So these are just a couple of fun facts that are probably reaching, but it's interesting. So apparently there was a version of the movie where they ripped Peter's eyes in the end, and they did that with test audiences, and they showed it to them, but apparently they said it was too intense. But that would explain why the pictures of Peter all have X's across his eyes, because there was a version of a movie where they actually took his eyes out at the end. And then also when Joan's doing the ritual, when she's showing Annie the ritual to like conjure her grandson or whatever, so she's like, Louis, Louis, is that you, Louis? Some people said that Louis could be a nickname for like Lucifer, like the devil, but that's probably reaching. And then there's one guy, he's like, the tree house is like a decapitated roof of a house, but that's probably reaching too. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I found. Yeah, man, it's a crazy movie. It's crazy. This was probably too long, but there you go. The end.